Welcome to Masters of Product Management, a show that gives you real-world techniques, cutting-edge strategies, and extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers. Now, here's the master himself, Stephen Haines.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, I want to tell you that I finished my tax returns. So that's a big cause for celebration. But what's interesting is that, this has been weeks and weeks of planning and pulling out pieces of paper and documents and forms. And what's interesting is, as a business owner, I keep good records. And even in my personal life, I keep good records. But we have to call on those records and present them and organize them and make sure that the accountants are doing what they need to do. And so as a good consumer, as a good business person, I have to make sure that everybody's doing what they have to do. And of course, you have to chase after the accountants and everybody else. Well, that's just great. But I have to tell you, this really got me thinking. And it got me thinking about record keeping and product managers and things like that. And, when I conduct my workshops through my firm, Sequent Learning Networks, these are our product management workshops. I will very often ask the question, so when you started your job as a product manager, was there any documentation that you could refer to? And it was about the product that people would inherit. And basically what happens in reality in most big companies, people who are product managers inherit an existing product. Not everybody is involved in brand new products and things like that. And when you inherit a product, you have to pick up the pieces. You're now the steward, and the steward basically takes all the work that's been done, figures out what's going on, and sets sail for the future. But I have to tell you, in my past, I would take on new roles all the time in the companies where I worked, and there was nothing. There was nothing on the shelf. There was nothing in a repository. There was nothing. I had to go reinvent the entire wheel. And it was interesting. I had interviewed a product manager in a pharma company a couple of years back, and I said, and he had come out of the sales organization, which I guess is where pharma product managers get farmed. Anyway, he said, well, it took me 6 or 9 months to figure out what the heck was what. And it took me another 6 months to figure out how to be effective. And that's a very long learning curve. And I have to tell you that leaders in companies today have no patience for learning curves like that. They want people to hit the ground running and just run to the wall. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about record keeping. And I was thinking about this before I started this show. Do people in my audience care about record keeping? We're listening. I've shortened the podcast itself is a 10, 15-minute podcast. It's because we are impatient and we have so much to do. And who the heck wants to fill out a form and put a template someplace? But I have to tell you that the amount of work that I've seen where product people have got to spend too much time is very often reinventing that wheel. And I suspect that there is a business case for good record keeping, meaning what's the return on time and time invested, if you will, in putting the right records in the right place and having access to artifacts and tools and things like that. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing to do. So I'm going to hearken to a chapter in the Product Manager's Desk Reference, and not necessarily say that this is the fait accompli at this point, but there's a chapter called the Product Master Plan, and it was built out of this idea that a master plan is a document or a construct, I would say, used in municipalities, used in universities, cities, states, and so on, to document the kinds of things that this institution of the municipality would want to undertake, roads and buildings and things like that would allow them to cast their nets into the future based on things that they've done in the past. And And what's interesting about the municipality construct is that, you could walk into your own town hall and say, wow, I have the tax department and the highway department and the building department and the education department. You have all of these different departments, but they keep working all the time, even though you may have elected officials who come and go. So those elected officials tend to be those stewards. And the comparison is that we as product people are stewards to the products business that have long lives. And it's not to say that all products are going to be, dozens of years in life, but many products stay around for quite some time and need the care and feeding that's necessary. So it's almost like it's a no-brainer. Why are we talking about this? And the reason I really care deeply about this is that it's important for us as stewards to have the wherewithal to keep things in the right place and accessible. And now it's easier than ever because everything's electronic and cloud-based and all that other stuff. So having the right structures would be great. So it's important to make sure that you have a unified product management repository where you can keep things like the templates and tools that you use, your business case template, your product strategy template, your customer visit plan template, all of these kinds of things that can serve to guide your work. All right. And then what about the output? So if I create a product strategy using a template, can I put the product strategy in the product strategy folder? Or as I'm cultivating or developing that strategy over time, can I have different versions of it and put those versions where they have access from other people who can work on it from a cross-functional point of view? And that I have the ability to baseline that and store that and say, wow, if my successor comes into this building at 2 or 3 years into the future, and they want to know what was our product strategy at some point and what was the reason for us being where we are, we'd have access to these kinds of things. And again, I'm saying this because more often than not, I see in companies where we are not doing these kinds of things. Okay, so we think about that. Now, there are a couple of other things. Well, what other kinds of things might we want to put in there? Well, let's think about this. Certainly strategies, certainly business cases, things like that. One of the things I like to keep track of, especially in my corporate life, is the market data, and that's sort of a big gorilla to get your arms around, so to speak. So think about market data. Well, I've got to have information about my customers. So what would I want to put in there? Customer research, customer visit reports, specific needs analysis, user stories, journey maps, things like that. So that we can characterize customers and preferences over time, right? So if I do visits every quarter or every week or every month, and I'm filing reports, if you will, or documenting what we learned and putting those insights out there, well, where should we put those? How should they be accessible? Literally either from a cross-functional point of view or from the people who will succeed us. Or what about competitive analysis? What about if I did reverse engineering on competitive products? Or what about things like industry trends? And I wanted to look at different markets and different geographies in which we were operating. I wanted to look at regulatory influences or economic influences. I want to be able to track these things over time. And I'm going to just segue for just a second, because if I think about market trends and market movements, one of the things I want to be as a product manager is a market expert. And I want to be able to say, here's the story and the evolution of the markets in which we've operated for years. And think about the value and the benefit of doing that, especially if we're plotting market movements with financial and other product performance information, and how that might be portrayed in things like life cycle state models and updated strategies. And where should we keep these? We want to keep these in some kind of a shared repository or centralized place. Okay, so think about what the benefits of these kinds of things are and how they might benefit you, especially in your company, in terms of inspiring communication or helping you make better decisions, or again, leaving those archives for people in the who are going to follow on. So think about that. Think about baselining what you have, evolving your documents, and having the ability to have a continuity plan, if you will. Now, there's one more thing that I'd like you to think about, and this has to do with your own work and your own careers. So think about a professional development strategy. I very often think about artists, and artists can be people who they use paint, they draw. Think about architects and anybody who might have visual documentation, if you will. And I live in New York City, and there are a lot of advertising agencies and artists and stuff like that. And I've walked through Soho, and you see artists carrying around these gigantic sort of folios, and it's almost like an oversized briefcase, 2 feet by 6 feet or something like that. And they would zip them open and bring them to a gallery or something like that and show their stuff. That's their portfolio of work. That's the evidence that they have to show people. And sometimes we as product people don't keep the evidence of our work. And those could be our strategies and our business cases and things like that. And it's a good idea, especially for moving jobs in our companies. And there are bosses who inherit us, if you will, because I used to get new bosses every year. So how would a new boss understand what the heck I had been up to? How would I actually show that person what I'd done? And so having those artifacts and that evidence becomes a great portfolio tool. I advise you be careful about that stuff, because you don't want to take proprietary stuff out of your building, but especially if you're leaving your job. But for the most part, it's really a great career planning and a career strategy tool. All right. So that brings me to the end of my line for today. And again, I really just wanted to talk to you about a topic that I think is important. It may not be the most exciting thing on the planet, because not everybody wants to go and do all the record keeping, but it's critical to be doing that. Anyway, so I hope it's been helpful to you and you picked up a couple of hints along the way. And if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss, or are interested in things like training, coaching, product management resources, or things like that, please reach out to me through the contact form at Sequent Learning Networks, and be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And also make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and other available media. See you next time on Masters of Product Management. I'm Stephen Haines.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management with Stephen Haines. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.